Hi everybody, Colin Stevenson here, joined by my hero John Lenhart. Hi John.
Hi.
Now this is our fourth instalment in our art series, and we've touched on some great topics up until now. But today it's going to be on behaviours, the behaviours of people, depending on situations, how they see things, how they feel things, maybe even how their own self-esteem is, because that also changes their vision and to look at things. So, would you like to start us off today, John, on behaviour and art, please?
Right. So we said art requires an audience, and the goal of art is to change or affect your behavior. That's the goal of art. It's either going to make you laugh, it's going to make you cry, it's going to make you think, it's going to make you stop doing something, it's going to make you pay money and laugh and enjoy yourself. Like, really, when you look at art, the goal is behavioral change, whether you like that fact or not. And I like to say everything is behavior. Everything that bothers you is either your behavior or the behavior of somebody else. It's all behavior. And so one of the ways I kind of pull this all together is we talk about how do you get a kid to get off a chair? A kid stands on a chair, or a kid, you don't want the kid to stand on a chair. You'll say, don't stand on the chair. Now, we talked about you can't do a don't. So when you tell them don't stand on the chair, they're 3 times more likely to stand on the chair.
Yeah.
Second of all, that's only one part of a story. Remember, art is stories, and our brain works according to stories. So when you tell that kid don't stand on the chair, there's 2 parts of the story are missing. What's going to happen if I do? And why don't you want me to stand on the chair, and what will happen? Our brains automatically fill in that story. So that kid automatically fills in, oh, you don't think I could do it, and you'd be amazed if I did it. And the kid gets right up in the chair and smiles at you like, aren't you amazed? You interpret that as, the kid's being, disobedient, and you want him to get in more trouble. But it's your fault for making a one sentence statement. You didn't give him art. If you want to hurt yourself, stand on that chair. Or if you don't want, to be able to play with your friends, stand on that chair. That's a whole story. And that's how you change behavior. So stories help us connect. Stories help us change behavior. Anytime I see somebody try to change somebody's behavior without a story, I sit there and go, why? You're causing that person's behavior not to change. And now you're going to punish them for the behavior not changing. Whose fault is it?
Yeah. And it's almost like taking the back step to ask the question as well. Sometimes, it's like the backward step, asking the question, do you think you're going to manage to stay on that all day? No, you might fall off. These type of things, you can ask them questions, but as long as they're gaining more information rather than the do not or don't or you can't, especially because when you're saying don't do that as well, it's almost like compassion guys like me, right, or compassion people. Someone tells me to do or don't do something, I'm not going to feel that they're connecting or they care about me. It's more about them and how they feel and how it's affecting them. Not that it's for my safety, for my benefit. So it's going to turn, and it's not because I'm rude. I generally understand people. So if someone said to me, don't do that, I would understand what they're doing and kind of use it in my head as well and just do it anyway because but knowing that some people are compassion, especially don't do that or do that for me now, they're not going to, it's not going to consciously or unconsciously sit with them.
Right. And I unconsciously confront people who do that. I say, wait a minute, if I told you what not to do, would you change your behavior? And it's like, why do we use something on people that we know doesn't work on us? So when it comes to art, how does it change our behavior? It's got to connect with us through truth. So some of the things you'll see in stories is when art goes through the 5 stages of grief. When they have a character go through these 5 stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. It That's truth. That's what humans do. It feels more real, and we feel connected to that. It feels like it's actually doing it. A big area is the intangible drivers of the characters. One of the things that it always kills me is when people don't like a story, they don't connect to the characters. I like to say all stories are character driven. If you don't care about the characters, you're not in the story. You're not connected to the story. It's not plot driven. You got to be connected to the characters. Otherwise, it's just watching a chess match, basically. So the way we connect is in the intangible driver. The minute that character does something different than the intangible driver they've set up, we lose that disconnection. We say we don't want to be involved. So one of the things that happens in movies and really good literature, and even TV shows that are really good, is the characters are written according to an intangible driver and they stick with that. The writer may not consciously know that that's the intangible driver, but they end up having the character always follow that. So I love using stories to explain people's intangible drivers. When we went through all the intangible drivers, I did that. I said, like, this character in this movie are like this, because those were all good examples of writers who made the characters very realistic and consistent because they had the intangible driver right. The third way is, and Ed said this, is good stories put you in flow. Dreams are always story. Dreams put you in flow. You have to be in flow to dream. And so a good movie is like a dream. The minute something happens that doesn't fit that dream, it's jarring and you come out of the dream. So it's okay for like E.T. to be a fantasy movie as long as everything in that movie is consistent with that. Because you have certain dreams. You don't have a dream and suddenly go, hey, that doesn't make sense. You're in the dream. It makes sense for the dream. A good movie puts you in this dream state. And as long as it doesn't awaken you from the dream by not following the 5 stages of grief or not having the intangible drivers or does anything that's disruptive, you will stay in that dream. You'll stay in that sense of flow. Time will seem to slow down. And a long movie doesn't feel very long at all. So those are the ways that art connects with you in order to change your behavior.
Absolutely. And it's the unconscious in us that stops that. It's like if we see them behave a certain way, and once they change, we might not see it, but we'll feel it, and we'll go, something's not sitting right with this scene. I don't understand, the disconnect's gone. Then don't get me wrong, that way you can go back into sleep, you can go back into a dream that's recurring, or you can go back into where you left off. Very rarely, but when you go back, you can do that with a movie as well, as long as the script's written. And you touched on something there that I found very interesting. The script writers, the screenwriters are all amazing at, usually in good movies and good TV programs, yep, at the consistency of the character, of their intangible drivers. There's not one person in this world, not one, well, there is now, that could tell them why they're doing that. So their job and what they've been recognised and what they're writing it's amazing. But there are a couple of people in this world, and you being the main one, and Jonathan, to be able to tell these people why they're doing what they're doing and being even better at it, and being more conscious about doing it. Amazing.
Right. So I'm going to start with the last point and go back to your first one because I like both these. The last point about this is that this happens to TV shows that go on too long. Is the characters, is they suddenly make a change with the character. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, that was not their intangible driver. They'll say they went through a personality change. That's fine. But who they are, it's a different person. I no longer feel connected. They violated that person's intangible drivers. And that's when we lose that person. So you're right about that. Now your first point is key, is art is unconscious. So when something happens, our conscious doesn't know it, our unconscious does. You can go back into sleep if you give up control consciously and fall asleep. If you sit there and try to go to sleep or have 3 thoughts, you won't do it. You can get back in the movie if you give up control and stop being conscious. The problem is the minute you start getting overly conscious about the art, that's where all of a sudden you're going to lose the effect because it's unconscious. So in the last episode, we talked about great art sticks around because it creates this disconnect consciously and unconsciously. I would say it's in the say and the do. The way that your behavior gets changed with art is a character says something that you consciously grab onto, and they unconsciously do the opposite. We talked about Karate Kid. Daniel's saying the hero, but unconsciously he's the villain. He's the bully. And that's what causes that to stick around. So how they change your behavior is they have a character say one thing and you don't notice that they're actually doing something different. And that's honestly how a lot of females end up attracted to destructive guys. They watch this character, a good-looking guy who says all these things, and he's just abusive. The guy's abusive. Look at how he's treating that girl. Look at how he's treating. Oh, no, 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 no. He's good looking and he says this. And all of a sudden, this female says out loud, I think that's attractive. I like that character. And her unconscious goes, oh, you want a guy who's abusive. And now all of a sudden, this woman has had her behavior changed by watching this character who says and looks right, all tangible, right? But intangibly is taking her off course.
Absolutely. And that just women, and you hear the people, she's always in an abusive relationship. I always seem to take these narcissistic men. I always seem to take on these, and it's through how they program their self that they are able to attach to that. It's not. It doesn't mean they deserve to be treated badly. It's just because they programmed the brain. And in the last episode that we spoke about porn as well. And it's the same thing about men programming themselves to that to change their relationships as well. So if you look at we're going to do one on women as well, but if you look at the way that these two just fit in together, if the woman was to make the right choice and the men was to make the right choice, they wouldn't have to go to porn or abuse. They would have this kind of close relationship. So the art and the behavior definitely comes down to their choices at the beginning and then how they allow these to repeat because we learn through repetition.
Right. So there's two big ways that art unconsciously confronts us. And we had talked about a couple of techniques of unconscious confrontation in the past, flipping the pronouns and we call it the right question. I want to introduce two more. Okay. So one way to unconsciously confront somebody is to talk about the issue and not look at them. If I were to talk about an issue I had with Colin and talk to you about it, but not say Colin, I could change his behavior by not doing that. So there's a couple of great examples of this. You know, one of them, one example I know of is we taught this to a woman who worked in a group home with all these teenagers who were troublemakers. And this 13-year-old grabbed a pair of dice and wouldn't give them back. Give it back, give it back. No one would give it back. She wouldn't give it back. And this woman that we taught this to, she walked up to another worker and she goes, it's such a great day outside, but, and the other one goes, what's wrong? And she goes, we can't go outside because somebody's being bad. It's too bad for everybody. And the kid comes up and goes, he's trying to and she's like, 1 second, we're talking. And she never looks at the kid and she just keeps talking about this. This kid was trying to give her the dice. It was burning a hole in his hand. He couldn't. And it's like what happens is consciously that person is seeing her talk to someone else consciously, and it gives you an avenue right into their unconscious. I'll tell you another great example. I think we covered this before, but I'm going to bring it up again. The Miracle on Ice, the 1980 Winter Games, the American U.S. hockey team beat the Russians. The Russians were so much better. The Americans beat them. The Americans had a coach named Herb Brooks. And what Herb Brooks did was he pulled Mike Ruzioni, the captain, aside, and he said to him, listen, when I yell at you and say, Mike, I think it was Mike, when I say Mike, I'm talking to the rest of the team. I'm not talking to you. When I say Ruzioni, I'm talking to you. And so he would yell at them, you're too slow, Mike, you're too, and he's really changing the behavior of the rest of the team. At one point, he yelled at him in front of everybody and said, Ruzioni, and he goes, Ruzioni, like, you're not yelling at me, are you? Like, yeah, I'm yelling at you. Herb Brooks changed the behavior of the entire team by yelling at this one guy consciously what he wanted to say to everybody else. Now, all of those players on that team went on to play some form of professional hockey except for one guy. Guess who?
Rosioni.
It was Mike Ruzioni, the captain. Think about that. He's the captain of the team, and he's the only one who didn't go on to play professional hockey. Why? Because his behavior didn't get any better. That's the thing, is when you do that, I say this to coaches and other people, you can change the behavior of your team by yelling at one kid for the benefit of everybody else. But notice that kid isn't going to get any better because you're making him conscious. That's how you change behavior, is you go at somebody for the benefit and you don't look at the rest of the people. The other way to change behavior the same way is to go at someone, but tell a parable. So you can ask somebody and talk about a situation just as long as it's not the specific one, but it ties to the unconscious level. And that's what movies do. That's the benefit of movies so what you do is you watch a movie, and I tell this with the teachers all the time. What are the books and what are the movies you're reading in class that everybody's reading? Because I want to know the characters. And then, so there's this character in this story who didn't share, his food with this other kid. And this kid isn't sharing his crayons. And it's really easy to ask that kid, hey, what did you think of that kid in that story who didn't share his food? And you got to get the kid to go, I think he was stingy. Oh, yeah. And you walk away. And now when someone comes to share the crayons, his unconscious is going to make him share it. That's what movies do. The last episode, we talked about men with this porn addiction. There's a great movie for men to watch if they want their behavior to be changed relative to porn. It's a movie called Wedding Crashers. Have you ever heard of that movie, Colin? Yeah. That movie is about porn. There's two characters who basically prey on these women and have sex with them, basically when they don't want to have sex with them, but they get to have sex with all these women because they play a certain way. They don't take any risks. They fake all this stuff, and they get women at weddings when they're most vulnerable, and they're having sex with all these women. And they, at the end of the movie, they kind of have to come to grips with, you realize what these guys were doing was porn. How do you still like these characters? And the character has to go, yeah, it was childish. Yeah, it was, like, they have to admit that or you're never going to come around. But what's happening in that movie is they are consciously saying this message. And what they're really doing is saying unconsciously, these guys are participating in porn, basically. And what happens is both of these guys painfully break their porn addiction by both of them taking an emotional risk with a woman.
Absolutely. And, just while you're touching on that film, I've seen that a few times and I do enjoy that movie. Now, most men who watch porn and are in this behavior of doing so will thrive on that film because what they will do is they will see the charge that these guys get every time they go to a party. Now, that film there is actually quite dangerous to people with a porn addiction, okay? If people are watching this, what they're then doing is going, this is what I need to do now. I'm watching the porn. I can now put it into real life. And this is what causes men, again, partly planting the seeds of promiscuity, moving on to different things. So I believe in a kind of psychology sense or an intangible sense that the film can program people in two ways. You can get to the end of the film like me and say the guy, it was good. You can actually see them now that they understand what they did was wrong. They're now wanting to come together with the women. Or the first one would be that the men that are sitting watching this and actually getting energy because they know that these men are out doing that.
I've found that guys who watch that movie, they can't, if they're going to keep participating in a porn addiction, they can't watch that movie again. They don't want to watch that movie. That's one of my measures. It's like, because what happens, that movie's a story, there's an arc, and these characters grow out of this and look back and say that. Yeah. And unconsciously now, what has to happen is the guy looks at that movie and say, what do you think of those characters now? And the guys go, they should have just stayed the whole way. I'm like, you just told me everything about yourself, whether you know it or not. But I've found that actually helps. One of the things about movies, and this is kind of like the last point I'm going to make about the behavioral changes, is because it's so conscious, unconscious. I've used to say to people for years, You know, they should have the Oscars. That's you guys have what, the BAFTA there,
Yeah.
the movie awards. The Oscars should be 10 years from now. One of the issues is they pick the best movie this year, and it's very conscious. And that's why there's all these, you know, what happens is they spend all this money doing a whole production and a whole campaign to get you to say it's this movie. There's all this stuff that goes on and all these strategies and all these predictions, because in reality, it's a very conscious and manipulative exercise.
Yeah.
It really is. But the reality is I love to say to people, go look at the movies 10 years ago. Look at the best pictures and look at all the pictures that came out 10 years ago. Which movies are you still watching? Which movies do you no longer watch? And it's amazing. This is where, like, you and Ed are talking about, music is worse, you know, over time. Movies are getting worse because they're not, what's happening is that there's nothing of lasting value there. And it's so easy to go back and look at movies 10 years ago. That won the Academy Award 10 years ago. Yep. I never think about that movie. I never watch it again. I don't even want to watch that movie. And that's the issue, is that really in the moment you can't really tell. So the way I close this is I want to tell a story about Jean Renoir. He's the son of the famous Impressionist painting Renoir, Claude Renoir. And so what happened was, he was a movie director. So his dad did all these paintings. He went into movies, and he created this movie, Grand Illusion. Years ago, it was rated number 7 all time of foreign films outside the US. He had, and this is a number of years ago, he had the number 1 rated movie of all time in foreign films. And it was called The Rules of the Game. Came out in 1939. Now, when this movie came out 2 years after Grand Illusion, when that movie came out, at the first screening, at the intermission, people tried to burn down the theater.
Really?
Now think about this. This guy makes this movie, and they, at the intermission, they try to burn down the theater. And so basically it was banned, it was everything else. Now, what would be your response? Now think about this journey of truth. We talk about getting into the conjunctive. Every movie he made was progressively better. And this is, I'm saying, 1939. So this is 60 years or 70 years later when I saw this list. His movies were all like better. This one was the number 1 rated movie. And then he never made another great movie after this movie. And what happened was, he was getting closer to the conjunctive of truth, and he nailed it with this movie, to the point that in the moment, these people tried to burn down a theater at intermission. So 30 years later, after this movie comes out, more than 30 years later, they vote it the number 1 movie. They want to do a restoration of it. They want to have this big event, and they bring him to the event, and they say to him, Jean Rene, this is the greatest movie ever made. And you know what his comment was? You're too late. And so what he's saying is here it is 30 years later. He's like, I was on a path of truth. I was making progressively better movies. I nailed this movie. And because of the way you all responded, I went a different way. And now 30 years from now, you tell me this was the greatest movie. You guys all took me off the path of truth. You took me off the path of art. And art that really, like, why are these people burning? Like, watch the movie, go, why are they burning down this theater? It hit them unconsciously so hard, they burned this theater down. And the whole movie is unconscious. The whole movie's unconscious. But that's the power of art. It changes and affects behavior tremendously. And I think that's what we're losing, we are not making art. We're making propaganda. It's not going to last. And all the movies that you watched from 10, 15 years ago, they probably didn't get very many awards when they came out.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as you're talking about the propaganda, over the last kind of year or 2 years, there's been a lot happening on the television and on the news. And you can see where it's changed from, from politics to lockdown to politics to voting. And people aren't talking about the thing before, because they're too busy talking about the thing now. So the too late thing that you just spoke about there, It just shows how good the propaganda works and how the kind of top psychologists, they might not have the words or the understanding fully, but they just know how to do it. And that's how they're able to kind of control the people in a certain way. So it makes a lot of sense what you put on that there. Absolutely. So this is number four. So we're going to go for music next week with Ed, and then you and I are going to come back and we're going to wrap up this series, which is going to be great. Now, I really hope genuinely people get the benefit from this, that we believe that they will. When they understand that art is everything and everywhere, they are the artist, but they're also the art as well. This is where they can go and they can find out all the big energy. So thank you very much for today, and I look forward to speaking to you next time. Cheers, John.
Bye.